For over 70 years, British comedy has woven itself into the fabric of our national consciousness, creating stars and helping to shape the universal television viewing experience. Comedy can be as diverse and wide-ranging as life itself, and British comedy's rich landscape epitomizes this. So please, don't adjust your set. We'll take it from here if you're not being served, as we explore the wide-ranging and often bizarre world of British comedy, with some of its best-loved stars exclusively on Beyond the Title.
Born in Wales to Irish parents, award-winning writer and comedian Jo Caulfield moved to London where she joined a rockabilly band before catching the comedy bug, following successful open mic spots which resulted in her stand-up debut at the New Act competition at the Comedy Cafe in Old Street, London. Inspired by comedy legends Joan Rivers, Dave Allen and Billy Connolly, Jo cultivated a sharp, conversational warmth that has made her become one of the most respected and influential comics on the circuit, who remains just as at home in the Comedy Store as she is headlining live at the Apollo. I caught up with the evergreen comedy heavyweight to talk heroes, laughter and her recollections on a glittering career in British comedy. Ladies and gentlemen, Miss Jo Caulfield.
So, Jo, welcome to Beyond the Title. I love talking to comics about their influences and inspirations. So firstly, who were your heroes growing up?
It's funny because it's people I was watching television when there was just one television in the front room and your parents were in control of it. So you were watching what they watched. And most television was aimed at older people, even though obviously my parents weren't that old. They were late 20s. But the one I really loved as a kid, we always watched Dave Allen. My parents are both from Ireland, and we watched Dave Allen. And what I remember was, I thought, what an odd little girl that he did sketches or he did his sit-down stand-up. And the sketches you would think might appeal more to a child because there's more going on and there's more people. But I didn't like the sketches at all. And I just thought, oh, why does he do that? Like, I didn't find them funny. I wasn't interested. But the sitting down with a drink and talking, like I'm watching this at like when I'm 6 or something, I think I honestly thought, I would like to do that. Sit down on a chair and just chat. And even now, I think Dave Allen, what he did really stands up today. He was very modern. I think he was our first American style stand-up. I'll claim him because my parents are Irish, in that he wasn't doing jokety joke, even though there's punchlines in what he does. He's not trying to be a shiny entertainer. He's on a level with you. And I think that's the greatest comedy, where it's like, hey, we're just chatting. And at the end of the show, it felt like it was your turn in the conversation. But the show was over, so you didn't get your chance. But it was that way of not patronizing an audience, just sort of say everything he does is, oh, I've thought a bit more about this than you have. So let me tell you what I've thought about it. And then you tell me what you've thought about it. But we don't get that chance. But it's always just, and I suppose as a kid, it appeals because he was questioning adults' behavior. You know, people that are all powerful over you. And he was looking at them and going, aren't people idiots? And the more important they are, do you know what? The more idiotic is the way they behave, and that pomposity of adulthood. Yeah. So him is the biggest to me.
Right.
It was funny when we spoke to Johnny from today. I am sorry. But and you can't ever imagine that Button.
Josh, so when we spoke to Johnny Ball, he said that Dave Allen started out at Butlins. And it's amazing to think you can never imagine someone like Dave Allen working at Butlins.
Yeah. And I think he would probably do it the same way because he had charm. Like, I don't think he would change what he did in terms of, like you say, he never patronized an audience, but he'd be very charming. So he would be able to pitch it to whatever audience. I always use Dave Allen's example. It's funny you say that, Josh, because whenever there's like terrible formatted shows on TV, like there was one, The Wall or something, and celebrities had to wear some sort of wetsuit and break through a wall. It was sort of ridiculous and humiliating, I thought, for any celebrity that was on it. And I remember seeing a couple of comics on it. And any show like that, I always think, could you imagine Dave Allen saying yes to that? Never in a million years. Like, it's weird now, all the things that comics are asked to do, they're not comedy shows. They're always like, well, you could have, a presenter, a newsreader, anybody doing this. It doesn't need to be a comedian. But that's what comedians are offered. And I just think he wouldn't do any of them.
Oh,
Josh said, no, you probably never get him eating a kangaroo cock on.
Yeah, no, absolutely not. Absolutely not. He would just turn it down and go, no, I have some dignity. I'm not doing that. Yeah.
Billy Connolly is a fascinating character in the story of British comedy in the way that he was among just a few comics to straddle between mainstream and alternative comedy. How significant was that in making comics of your generation able to follow that path?
Well, he did a really clever thing. I think because he'd started out in folk clubs, so he's doing music with some chat. And a lot of times what he did early on, it would be an old joke. So the structure is an old joke. So he knows he's got a punchline at the end, but he does it as though it really happened. So I think that's the mixture that he has of the old. Here's an unlikely situation. Here's a definite punchline where you're going to laugh. And then he makes the unlikely situation. If it's unlikely, he'll be like, oh my God, can you believe this? What would you be doing in this situation? But says it like it really happened, and you believe him. And I think I always say that's the most important thing in comedy. Do you believe what I'm saying to you, even though you know it's a lie? And people suspending disbelief and knowing, no, that really happened, but we believe you. But what I don't like is, and that was the difference often, and it's not that all mainstream comics are bad, there's some brilliant ones, but that they would not even try to make you believe it. I remember watching a comic on a cruise ship, and I'm like, that's 3 grandmothers you've had in this set. At least try to make it factually correct. Because I'm not invested. And I just stood there cold because I thought, I can't laugh at this because you're not bothering to make me believe you. And I think that was the brilliant thing that Billy Connolly did, is he made us believe everything he said. And also, again, like Dave Allen, full of charm, absolutely full of charm, and did seem like, and this is another great thing, if you can pull it off, the funniest bloke in the pub. That you really felt like, God, if we were sitting in a bar, what a great time we would have. You just wanted to spend time with Billy Connolly. And also the everyday working class experience of life, talking about upbringing, silly things from childhood, that observational comedy. We hadn't had a lot of people doing observational comedy. Americans had done it, but we hadn't had it, where people were talking about the big slipper or ridiculous things that were in our lives.
The Edinburgh Fringe has been a rite of passage for many budding comics. In your opinion, what would the comedy landscape look like without Edinburgh?
Oh, it's interesting. I mean, the main thing you think is comics would never be doing an hour of stand-up. It's a funny amount of time. Even if I'm on tour and I'm doing the whole show, 45 minutes, we'll have a little break. And comics doing Edinburgh always talk about that no matter how much you're enjoying it, At 40, 45 minutes, you feel like, oh, you should be able to get up, stand up, go and get drinks, something. It feels like interval time. And then you've got to go on and do another 20 minutes. So people often have a change of tone or something will happen in that time. So the first thing I think, yeah, we wouldn't be doing an hour of stand up, which would mean that people wouldn't explore what they do in stand up as much if you were just always doing sets, or if you were big enough to tour, doing a tour show where it would be harder to find things that are. I do things in a stand-up hour that I wouldn't do in a 20-minute set, because you can spend longer on a subject in an hour. If in a 20-minute set, no matter how many good jokes there are, if you're still talking about the same subject, it just registers in an audience's mind. They're like, she's still going on about that. That's, they have an automatic timer kind of where they feel you should have moved on. But if you're doing an hour, you can spend longer on a subject. I find I've had to look for devices. It makes you more experimental. I've had to look for devices where I can do jokes in a different way. So sometimes I've done a film script. I've put a story and said, instead of telling you I'm going to write it as a film, and I've done it like with, panning shots and all that, just to make it a different way of telling a joke. I've also done a story, done a kid's story, done different things, then done a big story at the end, which has callbacks to lots of things in the show. To give away tricks, I invent things that are in magazines. I go, look at this ridiculous article. Of course, I'm making it up. It's not true, but the audience think it is, and it's just a different way to tell a joke. So I think the Edinburgh Festival makes it, given comics an opportunity and a necessity to experiment, which has been great, and I've really enjoyed that. And then that means also when I do the tour show, I've got different ways to do things. Just breaks up a show. You can't just do just the talking. It's not enough. You can have slower things. It made me learn how to tell a story, which I was very frightened of at first, because a story is a lot of words, quite a lot of silence, which I used to be scared of, and then the punchline. And that really has to work because you've gone so long up to it. And I was really frightened of that, because I thought, oh my God, if there's not a payoff, that's really a long time of them listening to me. And I'm a sort of comic, I like there to be lots of laughs along the way. And then I learned, but if they're quiet, the release is that much bigger. So of a story, they're waiting to laugh. It's like they're going, we know the laugh's coming, we know it is. So when you've allowed them to laugh, it just bursts out. So again, that was another thing I wouldn't have dared to do if I didn't have to do it in the festival. Now, there's a lot of other sides to the festival, which are the business, where people will go, oh, that's where so-and-so's discovered. And there's no doubt, that happens. And even in small things, like I might get booked for something, and I won't know, maybe a year, 2 years later, and I'll go, I wonder how they find out about me. And they'll go, oh, we saw you at the Edinburgh Festival. So sometimes you don't know what you get from it. And other times, there was a woman sitting in my front row, and I'd been taking the piss out of her, and quite rude to her, because she seemed to be enjoying it, which encourages me. If they're laughing along, I'm like, well, now I'm going to really see how mean I can be, because I'm looking you in the eye and you're enjoying it. And then when I asked what she did for a living, she said, I'm the comedy commissioner for Radio 4. And it was a woman called, So she got the biggest laugh of the night, right, by saying that. She was a lady called Caroline Raphael. And then she said afterwards, come and have a meeting with me. I want to get you on the radio, see what ideas you've got. And so she then did commission a radio show, and I got a radio series from her, several. And at that time, there wasn't so much new comedy on Radio 4. There was lots of the established shows that had been on for years. So having a show on Radio 4 made a difference. And from that, I was able to have enough recognition to go on tour. So there's that business side of it that can make a difference. The bad side of it is people, and I think younger comics, throw too much money at it, listen to too many people telling them they have to throw loads of money at it. instead of just concentrating on doing good work, doing a good show.
An interesting thing when doing the research for your early career was the struggle to locate an exact date when your career began, which, when studying the history of alternative comedy, is quite odd because there seems to be two main entry points. Obviously, 1979 with the creation of the Comedy Store, but also around the 1990 time where Lee and Heron, Mel and Sue, etc. were around. Where do you feel you fit into that story?
Oh, I'd say the early 90s, yeah. Because I started later than a lot of people. So I came to London I was 17, came to London in 1981, but I was into music. I was in a band playing drums. I was selling rockabilly, 50s clothes and stuff. I was very into that scene, which there was a big revival of at the time, and a crossover with the sort of ska music. And so I was just very into that. I was waitressing. I didn't have any plan about comedy. I knew that as a waitress, if I was funny, I was quite funny as a waitress sometimes with customers, and sometimes I wasn't. If I didn't like them or if we didn't gel, I was like, it would close. I couldn't do it with everybody, which is what you have to learn in comedy. You can't just go, well, I don't like these people, so I'm not going to be funny. But I had an inkling about it all through that time, but it wasn't, nobody I knew was doing comedy. I didn't know even that it was a thing you could aim to do, really. And then my sister, who's older than me, she got involved. She was a writer, and she got involved writing, and then she got involved, weirdly, writing for Lenny Henry. She was writing sort of plays and things, but then she got a job as a scriptwriter at the Riverside Studios Theatre. Met Lenny and they just got on, and she started writing for his TV show. And then she got writing on other things. And I remember this is long before I took up comedy. She took me to a recording, and it was, now God, what was it called? Paramount City. And it was a stand-up show, and it was British and American stand-ups. And I didn't know any of these people. And I was sitting in the gallery, just mesmerised by it. And I can remember the people that were on it. Sean Hughes was on it, the late, great Sean Hughes, who was incredibly funny. I thought he was fantastic. Then there were some other British comics who I don't remember at all because they made no impression, apart from Sean Hughes. And then two American comics. God, now am I going to, it's going to really annoy me now that names are out of my head. One, sadly, has died. He had a Latino name, but he was very American. Greg Giraldo. Greg Giraldo was on. And I remember thinking he was very likable because the other one that had been on, again, names, who was a strutting guy, no cure for cancer, smoked on stage all the time. Dennis Leary. So Dennis Leary was on, who blew my mind. I'd never seen anyone like a rock star before. And the smoking and the leather jacket. And I was like, oh my God, he's amazing. And I remember he did routines that I identified with because I was a bit of a music snob at the time. And he did stuff about Barry Manilow. And I remember him saying, yeah, Barry, you write the songs and I'll drink the beer out of your head. And it was all about making a beer keg from Barry Manilow's brain. And I was like, well, this mind is amazing. And then Greg Giraldo came on, and he was gentle but clever, and had the routines were neat, like really, really well constructed, but at the same time had that very natural American style. And it didn't make me think, oh, I want to do stand-up. It made me think I could never do this because these people are so good. And I think I could see the skill in it. So I don't know what year that may have been, late 80s. But then the person I saw that made me think I could do it was Jack D. And I went with a friend to the Comedy Store. It's the first time I'd been in a comedy club. And I thought, oh, I could do this. because I couldn't see the skill. When I saw Jack D, he was out at the Comedy Store, Mark Lamar was comparing, and weirdly, I knew Mark Lamar from the Rockabilly circuit. So I was like, I didn't know he did comedy. Oh, and Mark was just being himself. Mark, there was nobody more confident on stage than Mark Lamar, and really was just himself, just sarky, fantastically sarcastic, rude, didn't care whether you liked him or not. And then when Jack D came on, I was like, oh, he's just like moaning and complaining. And I liked the fact that he didn't, like Mark, he didn't seem to care if the audience liked it. But the moaning and complaining, I was like, oh, maybe I could do this. Because I hadn't seen anyone like that before. Before that, it was definitely that people were saying things they thought the audience would like. But he wasn't. Jack D was just going, this is awful in life. These people are cunts. Basically it was like that was the theme of his 20 minutes. And I thought, maybe I could do this.
Why do you think the Comedy Store holds such significance for performance of your generation?
It still does. I think it's the most beautifully set up club, the old room and the new room. And you walk in there, any comic, that's why Chris Rock coming to London comes down the Comedy Store, because it's just right, the way it's set up. It's all rows of seats. People don't have tables getting in the bloody way. It's all about the comedy. The bar is small in comparison to the amount of people in that room, which is telling you this is about the comedy. You're going to get your drink and then you're going to sit down and watch comedy. And the stage isn't huge again, because there's space to move around, but you can have a band on there, but you don't need that much space in stand-up. So people are close to you and you can see people, the lighting, I know it sounds, but the lighting is perfection in that people sit in their seats feeling safe. They don't feel lit. But you stand on stage and you can see 7 rows back where people think they can't be seen. So it means you can really look at people, pick people out, not in a picking on people way, but just to communicate with people. You can look at them, hear a reaction to something, go to that. No. So I think, that Don Ward is amazing what he's done with that club. And everyone comes through it. That's the thing. Most of the people who are actually stand-ups, rather than people who might be comedy actors or actresses, they come through the Comedy Store because that's the club when you begin. That's where you want to play. And Don makes it very clear, you do open spots, and you might have thought you've had the best gig in the world, and then he has a little chat with you, and he looks at the bill, and he just goes, who do you think I should take off that bill to put you on? And when you look at the names who you've seen on that night, that's when you go, oh, maybe I'm not good enough. Yeah. Now, some comic recently told me a fantastic story. I will try to remember who it was, but it was Don Ward doing his little chat. Oh, it was Carl Donnelly. So this is Carl Donnelly's story. And he said that he had done his maybe 4th open spot at the store, and he knew he'd had a great gig, really great gig. Someone had heckled, he'd dealt with it. The comic before him, who was good, hadn't had as good a gig as they normally do. So he came off pumped going, this is it. Had his little chat. And Carl was just like, that's the best gig of my life. So when Don said, he went, well, I think I could match any of them. And then Don said, okay, well, do stick around and watch this next comic, Michael McIntyre. And this was before Michael got huge, but he was already going to be huge. And Carl watched him and went, oh, God. Because Michael really took it to another level. And I had gigged with Michael during that time, and it did make everyone go, oh, my God. He's just adding more, going higher, bigger laughs. And also he did a very rare thing that's never allowed at the Comedy Store, because he was on at the end of the night. He was allowed to go on longer. You never go overtime at the Comedy Store. But Don was like, Michael, yeah, he can go. Oh, and I think he did 40 minutes or something. And Carl was like, well, I thought I had reached the pinnacle, but no.
In what ways has the nature of joke telling changed since you started your career?
Um, has it changed? Because I can remember, I think what's happened more is we got a lot more personal narrative comedy. And that sort of comes from the Edinburgh Festival, where people will go, this is my story, this is my journey. It might be a mental health journey, or it might be actually a journey of something they did. And that is fine for Edinburgh tour shows. But if you're talking about a 20-minute set in a comedy club, the parameters of that are that they don't know you necessarily. And that's why I always think it's good to go into clubs to really test your material. If these people have no investment in you, are they going to find this interesting and funny? Because that's what they have to. They have to be hooked. They have to like you. They have to trust you're going to be funny. Very, very quickly, these things have to happen. And the only thing that I feel has changed, subject matter. I think comedy used to be very, very male, in that it was, I had gay friends who wouldn't go to a comedy club because would go, oh, it's just also homophobic. Because lots of straight men would do homophobic jokes, not in a definite, here's a joke about a poof. It wasn't like that. It would just be a throwaway remark that the inference was being gay is funny, being gay is somehow not the norm, being gay is a bit odd. As a straight man, oh, I wouldn't want to be that. There was that. And now, if you were like that on stage, people would, they would bristle, because lots more gay people come to comedy because there's lots more gay comics, men and women. There's loads, which has made it, thankfully, everyone go, oh, right, so you can't just go, oh, it's funny to be gay. That's not enough. And also, as a gay comic, it's not funny enough just to be gay. You have to have funny things to say. So that sensibility has changed, which I think is wonderful. And the audience has changed. There's loads more women now. When I started, literally none in terms of on the bill with me. You were never on with other women. For black comics as well, I've had this conversation with black and Asian comics. We were all seen as a novelty act. So they'd go, well, you wouldn't have two musicians, you wouldn't have two jugglers, so you wouldn't have two women, and you wouldn't have two black comics, and you wouldn't have two Asians. Because we were all seen as being, well, that's the same thing. You can have three straight white men, they're going to be different to each other. And so finally, in comedy, they've realised not all black comics are the same, not all women are the same, not all gay comics, So you have a variety on the bill, which I think has changed the makeup of the audience. I look out now, a lot more black people come to comedy that used to go to black comedy nights because there wouldn't be anybody like them on the bill. So like, yeah, I like comedy, but it would be nice if there was a black person on. Now there is. So I think in that way, what we talk about has changed. The way we talk about it has changed. But I think in terms of jokes, structures are sort of the same, really. You can see them in routines. And the way people put things together, I think it's just become things are more truthful. And again, even though it's a lie, I always think as long as you believe the lie I'm telling you, so things have to come from truth. In like an actor, there'd be some people who I'll watch and I go, oh, when they're angry, I go, I don't believe you're angry. You're pretending to be angry. And you need to believe people. And you can see an angry comic, like Sean Walsh is very angry. And I absolutely believe Sean, because what he's angry about is so unimportant, and you'll go, oh, fuck's sake, you can't really be that angry. But I believe it because that's who he is this frustrated person where everything goes wrong continually. Now, a rational person would go, really, it's not that difficult to order food in McDonald's. I don't know why you've got that annoyed about these new machines. But obviously that would be the end of comedy
Yeah.
if you think of it like that. So I think I think it would be interesting because I think the best people were good 20 years ago, and their routines stand up. I can think of Jack D routines that people could do right now. His going to a craft fair routine, one of the best things ever, and you could do that now, and you wouldn't have to change anything about it because it's just fantastic comedy.
So you touched on it a minute ago. We got to question 7 without mentioning gender. And I guess before alternative female comedians were extremely rare, how do you think your generation cultivated the footprint for gender equality in comedy?
Well, I always say that I was just being myself, and I didn't think I couldn't do comedy because I was female. Now, I wasn't overly confident at all. I was very, very unconfident on stage or backstage. It was a very unknown area to me. But and I don't know where it came from. I was trying to think, was it because when I was a teenager, the music I was listening to was a lot of women. There was Susie and the Banshees, and these were my male mates who were punks or new romantics or whatever, goths and everything. They were listening to them. They weren't making a distinction. There was Pretenders, was Chrissy Hind when I was like 14, really strong woman in the front playing an instrument, her band. There was Blondie, there was Toya, there was Scar coming in, and that had women involved as well in Selector. So I don't know if it came from that because I was very into that. And then even when I was on the rockabilly scene, and I wasn't very good at drumming, but they needed a drummer, and I thought, well, I think I could learn that. And I was in a band with men and women. And I remember some of the girls on the rockabilly scene thought thought I was a bit odd. And I think because maybe I was to them quite male because I was playing the drums in a band. But I just wanted to. I was just concentrating on trying to be good at comedy, and I didn't think of it as they're going to not like me because I'm a woman, even though I knew they didn't like me because I'm a woman. Because at that time, and this has changed. This is a big thing that's changed. And I never blamed audiences. There weren't very many female comics. And the ones, Jo Brand was already on television when I started. She was off the circuit, a big star. Jenny Eclair was a little bit around, but again, more on television. So in comedy clubs at that time, there was some terrible men and some terrible women as well. Really off the wall kind of crazy stuff. And so if women will go, often they'll say, oh, it's terrible. People come up to you after a show and say, I don't normally like women comics, but I like you. But they mean it as a compliment. They really do. They don't even realize that's an insult and that you can't say that. And you wouldn't say that to a Jewish comic. Like my mate Ian Stone happened to be with me when someone said that to me, and he went, oh my God, if someone said to me, I don't normally like Jews, but I like you. And I went, yeah, but they don't, they're not in the business, they're just drunk and trying to give you a compliment. And at least they have liked me, and it might change their mind about a female comic in the future. Because at that time, if you came on stage and they said, and the next comedian, she's really, as soon as you said she, you could hear it. People would go, oh. Some people would get up and walk away. So it was always a thing with MCs that they would say, this is long before pronouns became like this, they would say they. And you would say, just don't say I'm a woman, say this next comedian, they are. And MCs would always say that. They wouldn't say gender. And now I think one of the massive leaps forward for me as an older woman is that I'm introduced and people say she. And it's funny to me that it's the opposite of what people are talking about, where they go, well, I don't want to be defined as a woman. I don't want you to say woman, so can I be they? I'm like, oh, you can say she and no one gives a shit. I can go on stage, people know it's a woman. this is a massive step forward for me, but I'm just my life experience is different to theirs. So I've always just thought, doing comedy is hard. And I do look back at things where I've had bad deaths and really terrible gigs. And I always look back and I go, do you know what? You weren't good enough. You were still learning. And I think coming up, you look for lots of reasons why people may not find you funny. And you can, being a woman, you can say is one of them. But I think you have to learn, well, what is it about being a woman that I have to do differently to make them believe me? And I think with me, it was that I developed a very high status act, which I didn't realize. It's other people often tell you what your act is because, they're seeing you. And you don't see it yourself. And people, male comics would go, because you're very high status. And people were saying it for years, and I went, oh, I must be quite high status. That you're going on, not saying I don't take any shit, but just being, strong so that people go, oh, she knows what she's doing. Like I'm your boss walking into work. You have to pay attention. So whether I think back to some female comics like, there was a woman, she had great surreal one-liners, Sheila Martin, quite Harry Hill-like, but audiences never quite trusted her, and they didn't know if she meant to be funny. And that's a very hard thing with audiences doing those kind of, and playing a weaker character. Mark Simmons is very good at that now, because Mark plays very low status, but he's playing low status, and the audience know he's actually high status. And that it's an odd game you have to play with different sort of characters, that it has to be strong underneath. But maybe that is nothing to do with her being a woman. It's just that she didn't find that thing that enables you to be that sort of person. I think also audiences has changed. It's less gladiatorial, definitely, than it was. So, because younger people are different. Younger people are nicer. They've been brought up by parents my age who encouraged them. My generation, you weren't encouraged. You just, we've done our bit. You've grown up, now leave home and do whatever you're doing. But now people have very different relationships with their parents. I think I'm surprised sometimes how nice an audience can be, because I'm sitting there going, well, if I was in that audience, I would want this person off stage and I would want to heckle now because they're not good enough. But I think audiences are very different. The atmosphere is very different, which I think helps women. It also helps newer comics that have a different style about them. They get a little bit more of a chance to be quirky, without having to go, bam, bam, you've got to be funny right now. But it's still, actually, you have to be funny right now. But if you're learning, I think you've got a better chance to learn. When I first started, there was some women-only nights. And you could go on there, and it would be nice because everyone was very supportive. But I always felt it was a bit like pretending, because you're making allowances and you're all enjoying it, but the real job is going out in front of a completely mixed audience, all different genders, all different classes of people, and the thing of stand-up is you've got to appeal to all of those people. You can be Stuart Lee if you're Stuart Lee, and Stuart Lee has gone, I'm only doing this niche, these are my people. But actually, as he's got older and more skillful, I think now Stuart Lee can play to a lot more people because he really uses all the tricks in the trade of comedy. If you go and watch him, you're like, these are just the tricks of the trade of comedy, and he's really, really good at them. And I find, apart from his very occasional intellectual references, and even then he's taking the piss out of himself, I think he could appeal to a much wider and even a comedy club audience. I think he thinks he can't because He takes time on subjects. Well, I don't know, I can't speak for him. But I would say that he easily could, because audiences change. They give people a little more time. But it's also the nature of stand-up. You have to appeal to everybody. So you don't want to go in the women's ghetto. You want to, unless you want to do like a show where you're going, well, I'm just appealing to these people and this is my show and that's what I want it to be about. That's a different thing. You made a different choice then.
Josh, did you think that's why someone like Joan Rivers was so outrageous? Was because she felt like she had to be in order to get noticed?
Yeah, and I should have said Joan Rivers she blew my mind, seeing her. I had a friend who had videos. It was VHS videos of Joan Rivers on things like the Johnny Carson show, and it was also her. It was her manner, but also her subject matter, because she was doing jokes about women going to Mexico for abortions. When you didn't talk about that sort of thing in the 70s. And it would people, and she would say holiday to Mexico, and the way she would say it, everybody would know she's talking about a woman going to have an abortion. So, and she talked about, hard things in women's lives, but she did it, I think, because of the time she was in, she did it in an acceptable enough way. And she said she wore like her evening dress and that. So people go, oh, this is a nice lady. She's not threatening. She's a lady. But she's talking from a female point of view about some female subjects. And I think that's always the thing. If it's a niche, I know female subjects aren't niche, but they were at that time. They didn't think that's half the population. They thought, well, men run the world. So if you want to talk about your being one woman, then you've got to make it really, really funny. And that's what she did. And also the insult comedy, there was Don Rickles doing insult comedy, but for a woman to do it, great. But also there's a big history of wisecracking women in Hollywood films. Women were allowed to be funny in that way, of doing a smart line here and there. And I think she just very cleverly was like, oh, well, that's what I do, like in conversation or something, that she'd be like that. So to put that into comedy, and I think people were like, oh, we've seen wisecracking women. Yeah, we get what this is. But she wasn't her precursor, who was Phyllis Diller, who was, you have to be a freak. You have to have, crazy hair and all sort of a grotesque. And I didn't like that. And I've never liked that, where women have to put themselves down, because often it's women, Joan Rivers is an attractive woman, but she would go on about being fat, which I always thought was weird. So I didn't mind it, so I think it was a bit of a hangover that you have to be self-deprecating in order to get people on side. But I've never liked that, because I didn't see any reason for her to have to be self-deprecating. You can be self-deprecating, I think, more. I mean, I might be about being high status, but then sort of taking the piss out of myself for being pompous and high status. And playing that card, and they go, oh my God, she's a fucking idiot. She's a loser. But she's playing like she's a real winner. But I think Joan Rivers was massive. And I learned from her, watching her and listening to records of her, that she had the insult lines ready. She's not improvising the insult lines. And that was the thing I didn't realize. That she would go, oh, let me look at your ring. Oh, you're not a Jew. You're a shitty little ring. And she would do that over and over again to audiences. And she had her line. And I was like, oh, right. So the audience will think they're improvising, but these lines fit lots of, it's just a little trick to learn. But I think she was amazing, and I think it was much harder for her, and much harder for her personally and emotionally, because, as she said, it was such a boys' club in that they all went off together, and went to nightclubs, and she went back to her husband and kid. And if you didn't want to play, hey, I'm the good time girl, I'll go out drinking with you all night, because she was like, well, that's not my life, then that's harder. But I think that's the same for women in any walk of life at that time. In business, it would have been the same. The guys are going to go to the club, and we're going to watch strippers, or we're going to go and play golf. And if you're a woman, that's not your world, then you're not going to be part of this. Or you can pretend to be part of it and have a hideous time. So I think it was, I think the things that were hard in her life were hard in lots of women's lives at that time.
In 2007, you were part of an all-star lineup for ITV's Saturday Live, again hosted by a friend of the podcast, Marcus Brigstocke. Looking back, how do you think that was a visual representation of your generation passing the torch?
Oh, I don't know if we were passing the torch. I don't think comics are too egotistical to think, oh, I'm passing the torch. We're always thinking about what is the next thing I want to say. And I think I'm of the age now where I feel like people think that you should stop talking. You go, well, are you going to retire? You go, of course not, because I've got more and more things to talk about. You're not going to run out. So new people can come along, and sometimes when you're getting older, you go, Jesus, there's a lot of new comics come through the door, but they're talking about their thing. They're also talking about things I've talked about, because I've been through all the stages of life they're going through. So I don't care. It's not a threat to me. The only thing I don't like is if you think that I should stop talking now, or if you think you could go, well, are you going to go out the other door now? No, I'm going to be in the room with you, but just talking about what I want to talk about. So I have no memory of thinking that I was passing on a torch or anything like that. I would be helpful to new comics who I think are good, and I always think it's important, if you're on with someone who's an open spot and you think they were good, tell them, because you don't know how much they might need that compliment. They might be 2 weeks away from going, Jesus, I can't make any money, I'm quitting. But, that comic that I've heard of said that I did a good job, or noticed a joke that I had, so I think it's important to do that, So I'm a nice person, Josh, but I'm not going to hand over the torch.
There's a limit to the...
Yes.
The Royal Variety performance is seen by many as a traditional link to the past. How do you go about picking the right material for the tone of the show?
Well, it was my whole Royal Variety experience was sort of overshadowed by how it was done, because it was during COVID. So I hadn't left the house. We were going to Blackpool, so even to travel seemed incredible. I was traveling, I drove there, so there was less chance of anything happening. I hadn't driven a long distance for ages. And then we were all separated from each other. They did makeup, but they had masks on, and they were sort of daubing you, to keep a distance. Even when we were eating, we were sitting at separate tables. There was no after party, we just all went back to our hotel rooms, and it was done. And also it meant I hadn't been able to try out my set. Normally, if you're going to do TV, you'll go down to a club and go, can I have 8 minutes to do my TV set? So we hadn't. So it was just very generally, so we knew there wasn't going to be any royals. There was no audience. The audience was so weird. It was screens on the seats in the big Blackpool, beautiful Blackpool Theatre, and they had them watching. But Jason Manford, who was hosting, and I got the gig because Jason recommended me. He had done a gig with me, and he was really complimentary, and he said, if I can do anything for you, I will. And then he got hosting that, and they asked the host comics, and he recommended me. And he said, but it's still up to you, Joe. You've got to send a tape of yourself, and they've got to like it and approve you, which they did. And then Jason said to me, he said, find the sound guy, because they're going to have to pump in added laughs because there's not going to be enough in the room. And this is how smart Jason is and why he's so successful. And he said, because they won't know where the laugh is. They'll think it's wherever you pause. And so I did find the sound guy, and I was very glad I did, because Jason was right. They would have put a laugh in where there wasn't a laugh. And I went through and I went big laugh, and also they would put a massive laugh in where it doesn't deserve a massive laugh. So you go, oh no, that's just a little laugh. That's the big laugh. So the doctoring, to give away secrets, that was, that's still, again, as a comic, that's all part of your job, because it's your little business, it's your thing. So you have to look after it. And to be honest, my main thing also, it's a big opportunity on telly, but I had a real problem with singing the national anthem. And I got into a real state about, I don't want to sing the national anthem, and I don't want to curtsy to a member of the royal family. And particularly if it's going to be William and Kate, I'm not going to curtsy to Kate. What's she ever done? If it had been the Queen, big respect for the Queen, I would have curtsied, old lady, done her job. But I'm like, oh God, the new ones, absolutely not. But then luckily, none of them were there, so I didn't have to do that. They did a song at the end. And again, Jason was very funny. And he went, this is the bit that most comics hate, because we are, not all comics, there are comics that would love it. But I'm the sort of comic go, this is like organised fun. Oh, we're all going to sing a Beatles song at the end and sway. Oh, my worst fucking nightmare. And during it, but I kind of had to do it. And they'd positioned me in a way that I couldn't sort of sulk. And Jason, during it, turned around to look at me to see what, she's hating this. I know she is. And I was there, doing my impression of a happy, well-adjusted person enjoying themselves, So it's funny, the things that I was het up about. But the material, it was more like, well, I know what you can and can't say on TV. So I've got plenty of that sort of stuff. And I thought, and it's relatable because it's just observational. So I just picked stuff. And stuff that maybe sometimes my stuff can be too mean if you're not in the room with me. So just a little bit conscious that TV sometimes you lose that camaraderie that you have in a room where they will let you say the nastiest thing because you're looking at them and they go, oh, it's just Joe, it's all right. Yeah.
If your material work, if you
Josh said, how do you know if your material works if you're just doing that thing where you've got the automatic laughing track in the...
Oh, well, because they are laughing, but he said it's just not going to be loud enough, so I know they'll add it. So they were There was a reaction
Oh,
in the
on the
room.
screens on
Yeah.
the chairs.
Yeah, there was a
Yeah,
reaction in the room to give you the timing, but Jason was saying it's not going to be loud enough, and I know they'll add it in
yeah.
post. So that was how,
Yeah.
yeah. And I also did material, I didn't do like, I didn't go on the Royal Variety going, do you know what? I'm just going to try out a new five. I did stuff that I had done and done and done. So I knew exactly where the laughs were, and I knew that it would work unless, well, pretty much it would work. I couldn't imagine it not working because I'd done the material so much.
Yeah. Jo Caulfield Won't Shut Up is an interesting title for a radio show. What was that about?
Well, it's about what always my shows are about, even to this day, like doing the new show for Edinburgh. I pick a title because you have to pick a title like quite early before you've written your show for the festival. So this year it's Bad Mood Rising because it always have to be something that fits. And Jo Caulfield Won't Shut Up was just like I thought it's a way to let people know it's just going to me talking about whatever I want to talk about. Because that's always what my shows are. What's annoyed me, pissed me off, what irritated me, people, things. I'm just going to be talking because I will have to do this. I'm doing it to you on the radio, but I'd be doing it to my family or to friends or at a bus stop otherwise.
Why do you think Radio 4 remains so important to the direction of British comedy?
I don't know. I think it's changed. I think it's changed a lot with podcasts. I mean, I know I certainly listen to Radio 4 a lot less because, I like what Radio 4 does in that I like spoken word comedy. I like documentaries, radio documentaries. I like people reading a book. I like all that kind of stuff. And podcasts have just taken that to another level, I feel, because they're not having to appeal to a huge cross section of the audience who might write in going, I was listening with my 5-year-old and you said such and such. And that's the thing I've always found frustrating about Radio 4, that I've always felt constrained on it. Whereas podcasts, you're completely free and you can say whatever you like as long as it's not libelous, and they'll take that out anyway. But you feel free to swear, you'll feel free to. I think Radio 4, sometimes it's the meanness where you can't just go, oh, that's fucking shit, that. And they're like, oh, that's not very nice to say about. So, where we go. So I think it has changed, and I think Radio 4 is in a hard place. For politics, I listen to loads of political podcasts that are much more informative than I find Radio 4 is at the moment, and less biased, or maybe more biased to my point of view. But I think certainly when I was starting or growing up, and that is also the thing, that Radio 4 comedy from that era, Hancock's Half Hour, the Navy Lark, God, what is the other one with Kenneth Williams? Round the Horn. Round the Horn. I don't think there's ever been such a good radio show. And everyone of my generation, even though we were way past it, because that was made in like 50s and 60s, I still think that's the best stuff that's ever been made for radio. And I think because that was all they had. So they were kind of doing the podcast thing then of going, let's push this as far as we can. And it was young and fresh, and it was rude as they could be within the parameters, but lots of double entendre, lots of sort of politically having a go at things, again, in those strict parameters, that there was in jokes that the audience knew. And I think that was a very, very exciting time for radio. And I don't know if it's been as exciting since then, because it's quite hard to go out of those parameters. I think knowing me, knowing you, Alan Partridge, I think that crew did some fantastic stuff, and Armando Iannucci has done some fantastic stuff on radio. Haven't listened to a radio comedy for a while because I found it a bit staid. But I think maybe its heyday is over.
If we're talking about Radio 4, we probably need to discuss I'm Sorry I Haven't a Clue. In your opinion, what's the secret of its longevity?
Again, I haven't listened for a while. And again, I love Jack D. I loved Humphrey Littleton when he was the host, and it was a show I listened to a lot. I listened mainly for Humphrey Littleton. And people always said that it's about him because he was a jazz person, his timing was great. But it was the timing and as a comedian, to watch someone just let lines go, just dropping them out there like, I don't really care. I'm not even aware what's funny about this. He always had that kind of removedness from it, which was absolutely glorious to listen to because it made a bond between you and him against the panel. Like, he was like, me and you, we're together on this because these people are just idiots. I don't even know why they're doing this. What is the point of this? And we would be listening going, I know, Humphrey, you're so right. And then they would be more like the performing monkeys and doing what they're asked to do. So I liked it. So it's not a show. I mean, I do like Jack, and I think Jack D was exactly the right choice. So I suppose the familiarity, but there's things in it I don't like. The tune bit, I've never liked musical comedy. So when they do that bit, I don't like it. So that's probably not the answer you wanted.
Looking back at your career, what's your proudest achievement?
I mean, there's things you could say that you did. I suppose people would say Royal Variety, but I would go, no, that was literally about, I want as many people to see me as possible, but it's probably not the best performance I've ever given. And I think I'd say the proudest is that you go on writing new jokes, that you don't run out, and that you don't run out of the fire and the will, and you don't get dead behind the eyes, and you have new and exciting things to say. And to me, it's especially as you go on in this business and you see the vagaries of people in radio and television, how they come and go, and they're looking for what's new, and then they're throwing away what's new, and they're looking for the next thing that's new, is to just go, fuck that, just concentrate on, to me, being the best stand-up I can be, but also whatever job, if I do corporates and things as well, to go, how do I do that and be me in it and find ways to make these things work, which I have, which I really enjoy now. So I think it's like anybody, and this then makes you have to talk about yourself in a very pretentious way. But I do look to, musicians whose careers I've admired. I think Patti Smith said an amazing thing that I'm going to quote wrongly now. And again, I think she's a very principled woman, came up in a time when women weren't doing much. And she said she never thought about gender. She just thought about the art. Now, I won't say art, but I agree with what she said. But also she said, concentrate on the work and the work will become your currency. So don't be looking, following the money, follow the work. And then if your work's good enough, you'll find out, you go, oh, do you know what? It's 30 years later and I'm making a very nice living from comedy because I've concentrated on the work. On a little way of a thing that you went, oh, that is a nice thing to have happened, was doing a gig at the Comedy Store, and Chris Rock had come down because he'd come down to look at the room because he was coming in the next night. But I was only doing that night, and I did a set, and I didn't know he was watching at the back. And then when I was writing for Graham Norton, we did a series from New York for 3 months, which I bloody loved. I lived in New York for 3 months. And Chris Rock was a guest on the show. I did the warm-up as well as writing. So I'd done the warm-up, introduced him. I'm just standing in the corridor. And I would always be, it was sort of part of your job to not annoy the guests. Don't be going, oh, Chris Rock, I think you're amazing. Just go hi and let them get on there at work. And then he went, oh, I seen you. I don't remember your name. And he was really nice, but I don't remember your name. I'm really sorry, but I saw you at the Comedy Store and you did a joke about, and you said a joke that I had done, and I was like, that's all I need, Chris Rock, amazing, one of the best, and he remembered me and remembered a joke.
Yeah.
So, last question: what's next for Jo Caulfield?
Edinburgh show. So that's a new show that I'm writing. So that's because I really enjoyed doing my show last year. And that's kind of a problem because then I really enjoy it and I go, oh, well, I'll do it next year, forgetting that means writing a new show. And that's a lot to come up with and then try it out and then sort of hone it and perfect it. So I'm doing that at the moment and I'm excited by it and I'll come up with new things and I come up with a new little device. So that's good. I wrote a book 2 years ago now, it came out August 2023, called The Funny Thing About Death, which was about when I lost my sister to cancer. And it's sort of a memoir really, and a kind of tribute to my sister and also me trying to understand how she influenced me, because she did a lot, and how I go on now without her. So a lot of it, surprisingly, is very funny, and people have said that it's very funny because it's talking about a child, it's talking about her attitude to life as well, and she was very funny. But I really enjoyed the process of writing, and also it was a different part of myself. So I'm sort of writing at the moment with an idea to a new book, but I'm just going to see where it goes because I'm not sure. That one had a narrative to it. And I'm not sure if I've got a narrative to this or whether it's going to be more like sort of essays, my thoughts on everything. But it's something I really enjoyed. And it was a funny process as well because she was a writer. When I was writing, I was like, I felt very close to her because I was like, oh, this is why she loved writing so much. I really like this focus. And I hope that I wrote it, I was very conscious not to change who I am. Like when I wrote, don't suddenly become, because I think that can happen sometimes where if you're writing on a computer, you suddenly get very formal and talk in a Dickensian kind of a way. And it was the year of our Lord, 1972. So I read it out loud all the time to myself. I'd write a sentence and go, does that sound like me on stage? It has to sound like me talking. So and then people have said, oh, it sounds like you're talking. So I was like, well, that's the way that I want to write rather than lose the voice that I've developed for so long. So that could be something that will happen.
Excellent.
Oh,
Well, great way to end. Thank you very much. You've given us a little journey.
Good.
We really appreciate your time.
Thank you very much to our wonderful guest for being the subject of another Beyond the Title episode. If you like this, why not browse the website and see if there's anything else you like. We're now on Spotify, iTunes, YouTube, SoundCloud, Apple Music, and Amazon Music. Everywhere, quite frankly. Don't forget to like our Facebook page to receive updates on forthcoming interviews, and please do give this podcast a little share. Not in a shoop-shoop song kind of way, you understand, although that's probably quite welcome. Thanks again. Hopefully see you next time. From all of us here, goodbye.